You might think you can't turn a flip-flop into a piece of art, but you would be so wrong. The team of sculptors at Ocean Soul in Nairobi, Kenya carves the most common footwear on the planet into hippos, giraffes, whales, and more. And so far the company says it has cleaned up around 10 million sandals from beaches, streets, and landfills.
They cost like $1. The problem with that is they break very easily. So what you have is a huge menace. It flip-flops everywhere.
In fact, in some parts of the world, flip-flops make up nearly a quarter of ocean plastic. Can a team of hand-carving artisans make a dent in such a huge source of litter? We went to Nairobi to see how Ocean Soul makes art using worldwide waste. This style of sandal is some of the oldest footwear we have, dating back thousands of years. As plastic became cheaper toward the end of the 20th century, foam flip-flops took off. Today, we make over 1 billion of them every year, but most don't last long. That means a lot of flip-flops end up in landfills and waterways. In Kenya, the coasts are often littered with them.
So trashes come from even as far as from India, Philippines to over here. So sometimes we are shocked.
We have a network of collectors that collect flip-flops from our weekly beach cleanup efforts at the coast of Kenya. When you bring the flip-flops to us, we pay you an equivalent of 30 cents US per kilogram.
You'd need to bag more than 25 pairs to make the minimum daily wage of a typical worker in Nairobi. All told, collectors usually bring in about 1 ton of flip-flops per week. That's more than 3,000 sandals. First, the shoes go through a thorough hand wash using water and detergent.
We live in a very hot climate. It takes probably 2 to 3 hours for them to dry, and then our artists will come to pick them and use them to make the sculptures.
For small and medium sculptures, workers die-cut the flip-flops into templates. Then use a non-toxic glue to bind the shoes together.
Remember, we're using a tiny flip-flop, so you have to build up before you're able to carve down. Then our artists will carve them out into a finished product.
The company has around 90 employees. Many of their artists used to make traditional Kenyan wood carvings. But that kind of work has dwindled since the early 2000s when Kenya scaled back logging, which made raw materials harder to come by.
When I used to do woodworking, I never thought of destruction of environment.
These artists say working with a softer material isn't too different from working with wood. The knives and sanding tools are the same, but you do get fewer splinters.
The end product will be a crab. It takes almost 2 hours to complete a piece.
For larger pieces, artists repurpose old insulation from shipping containers as a base and cover them with flip-flops.
And that's why with the bigger sculptures, you'll notice that they have a contour look, while with the smaller ones, there's a stripy look.
Nearly every part of the process is done by hand, and it can take up to 3 months to complete some of the larger pieces.
The only time we use a machinery is when we come here to sand. So after they're done carving with a knife, they'll come here and sit down and use these sanding machines to smoothen the sculptures. I'm gonna walk out of here because it's too noisy.
The company keeps a stock of marine animals, like turtles and whales, in keeping with the clean ocean theme. There's also safari-inspired carvings, like elephants and giraffes, which are the best sellers.
People say that they love them because of their twisted necks, and they also have beautiful eyelashes.
The sandal shavings get repurposed.
We have a shredder in the back that shreds them into smaller pieces like this. And from here, we're able to make mattresses that we donate to a refugee program in northern Kenya.
Next comes a quality control check.
The lady will make sure that, the elephant has 2 ears, 2 eyes, 1 tail. If anything is not right, it's returned back to the artist where they will fix it.
Then the statues are washed one more time before being shipped to their destinations. The plastic and rubber often used in flip-flops poses a unique danger to marine life.
They actually target plastic, thinking that is food. The smaller fish, having ingested plastic, tends to be buoyant in that they are not able to dive down into the ocean because of that light material in their stomach.
Julie Church, the conservationist who founded Ocean Soul.
All right. Greetings, everybody. It's wonderful to be here once again this evening. I believe you all have a wonderful day. It's been an insightful section so far. Yes, welcome to this evening workshop. We are glad to have everybody on the call. I see a lot of people joining us via YouTube this evening. Trust your day has been wonderful. Trust you have been doing well. And I believe you also enjoyed last section. It's a privilege to have you on the call today. So officially, I'm saying good evening, good afternoon, good morning to you, wherever you are, according to your time zone. So it's another time to learn again. Thank you. So let me just pick one or two comments from Facebook. Yes, I see all your chat. I can see you joining from Nigeria. Thank you for having us this evening. You're welcome from Ghana, from Kenya. You're welcome, you're welcome, you're welcome. So it's been wonderful so far. Yes, without wasting time this afternoon, we'll just get right to the business. I'm glad to let you know that we already have our facilitator on ground. She's loaded and she's ready to give us full knowledge today. So sit back and be ready to learn, to get engaged, and also prepare to ask questions. All right. So before we move into the discussion this afternoon, I would like to read from here the profile of our facilitator this afternoon. So it's a pleasure to have Ms. Deborah E. Edward with us, who will be taking us this afternoon. So here we are. Deborah Edwards has been navigating the dynamic realm of communication for 4 enriching years, a journey marked by a blend of delight and challenge, from collaborative team efforts spanning diverse industries to charting strategic roadmap for going startup. Our trajectory has been a testament to constant growth and evolving expertise in content creation. Recently assuming the role of strategic communication and partnership at Circular Economy Innovation Partnership, CEIP, Deborah finds herself immersed in the transformative landscape of circularity. For her, circularity embodies the ethos of closing loops, fostering cross-section collaboration, and embracing long-term thinking. Deborah's journey continues to unfold, driven by passion for sustainability and a commitment to fostering impactful change in the communication and circular economy sphere. So it's a privilege to have Ms. Deborah E. Edward to take us on the journey of circular innovation this afternoon. You are welcome, Miss Deborah. Can you say hello?
Hello, good evening. Can you hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear. Oh,
Yeah.
I love your glasses, ma.
Thank you so much. Good evening.
Well, good evening.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. It's a privilege to be here. It's always a privilege to share the knowledge that I have gained over the years with people who are interested also to carry that knowledge forward. So thank you so much for the opportunity to do this. As usual, when they read out the bio. I think I really need to go sit down and look at that my bio yet again. It always amazes me all the words that are there. But I think I am quite a simple person. I enjoy learning, and I think that's part of how I came to know about circular economy. So today we're going to be looking at something very quickly. Let me share my screen. Okay. So we're going to be looking at circular economy and sustainable waste management. I don't know how many people are familiar with the concept of circular economy. I think at this point, we probably have done a lot to carry that message of circular economy around. But in case you do not know what circular economy is, you'll find out today. But before we do that, I'd like us to watch a video. It's about, let's say, roughly 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 30 seconds. I think it would sort of shed a bit of light, not necessarily into what circular economy is, but then what the challenge that has necessitated circular economy is. So just bear with me for 2 minutes. 2 minutes, 12 seconds. Let's go through this. I want to assume everyone can hear.
We all consume more today than ever before.
Okay.
Most of that consumption is by the middle class. And that middle class is expanding, with most of them living in Asia and thinking sustainably. 50% of Chinese millennials said they would spend more on a product that stated its carbon footprint, which means there's an opportunity for companies providing sustainable solutions. But business as usual isn't an option. Decreases in raw materials and the effects of environmental damage are starting to affect productivity. Meanwhile, the adverse effects of climate change are being felt. Companies are acting to mitigate their environmental impact, reducing their consumption of raw materials, controlling waste products, developing cleaner energy sources. But the scale of the problem is too big. Even if China can reduce energy intensity per unit of GDP in every 5-year plan for the next 20 years, it will still end up emitting 15 gigatons of CO2 equivalent by 2030. That's twice as much as the US emitted in 2007. Consumer demand drives growth, making governments less likely to intervene. What we need is radical action. Business is best placed to create a new circular economy and develop the innovative, sustainable systems that will make a real difference. Decoupling growth from consumption, collaborating in new ways with governments and NGOs, and working from the bottom up to involve everyone. How can your organization get involved to help create a sustainable future?
Okay. So that was quite a short video that was intended. Of course, yes, they are addressing businesses and all that. I'm sure that every individual here today is not necessarily a business owner. We probably have different things that we do, but I like us to think of ourselves as powerhouses. Why do I say powerhouses? I feel like every single one of us is so much more than we think that we are, in the sense that you are connected to so many individuals, and essentially the example that you showcase outside, a lot of people are influenced by, regardless of how little you think your community is or your scope of influence, right? So I like you to keep that in mind as we talk about circular economy, because most of the time people tend to think that circular economy is only focused on businesses. True, businesses have a role to play, but then individuals also have a role to play. Why? Because we are the ones that patronize these businesses. We are the ones that this business create things for. People create things so that it can be of service or of help to other people. Now, what is circular economy? Simply put, circular economy is focused on eliminating waste. I'll take that again. Circular economy is focused on designing out waste. That is, as much as possible, how can we minimize waste and how can we ensure that we have resource efficiency? What we currently have today is something called a linear economy. That means that we're constantly taking things, making things, and then probably dumping them. When we say taking things, we're taking things from the earth, we're taking things from around us, we're taking things from nature, and then we recreate beautiful things out of them. But when we're done with these things we have created, say our tables, our chairs, what happens next? When we're done with creating the phones, the lanterns, what happens next? We often dispose of these items. That is typically what is experienced in the linear economy. Now, circular economy comes to say, instead of us taking things, making things, and wasting them, how about we close that loop? So how about we take things, we make things out of them, and we keep on utilizing these things until they can no longer be used anymore? How about we take things, make things, and in our process of making things, we think about it carefully to say, is this the best way to create this item? So it means that, for example, if you are a phone maker or you are somebody that is creating an item, say a dress, let me use, yes, a dress, because I think fashion is probably at what is called at the top of my head at this minute. Now you're creating an outfit for yourself. You will have to think, is this the best way to cut this material so that I will eliminate as much waste as possible, so that I will have less off-cut as possible? I'm sure none of us wants to give our tailor like 6 yards of material to sew only a t-shirt for us. I know that there are tailors that do that. They will steal your material and go. But that's not what we want. We want to see as much as possible, how can we use 1.5 yards of a fabric to create our outfits, and as much as possible not have waste. Right. I'm trying to use examples that are quite relatable to us, that we constantly have in our environment. So what happens to all the offcuts? If you are a tailor or a fashion designer, what happens to the pieces and the materials? That person will then take those pieces and materials and say, what else can I do with it? Definitely, I will have to cut off the part for the hand and the neck. What can I do with these scraps? Well, there are several things you can do with the scraps. You can spin them out into materials or threads that you can use to create other clothes. You can turn them into stuffings for stuffed animals and pillows. There are so many different things that you can do with waste, provided from the very beginning you think about it to say, I do not want to have waste. So what can I do differently? Right? That is basically the framework of circular economy. How can I minimize waste? And that is what has led to 2 particular material flows. We have the technical material flow and we have the biological material flow. We have the technical material flow and the biological material flow. The technical material flow is focused on things that typically do not biodegrade. So we have things like our phones, they don't biodegrade. We have things like our appliances, they don't biodegrade. We have things like metal, they don't biodegrade. That is, they do not decompose easily. They form the technical material flow. And that's where you have to see that a lot of thought is put into what is being created, because as individuals, we should be able to use things for as long as possible. But have you noticed something today? That if you find something that was created many, many years ago, right? It seems to have like a higher value, a higher or a longer lifespan than what is created today. So, for example, I have a glass bowl in my house, right? I have a glass bowl in my house, and that particular bowl has been passed down from generations to generations, literally. And then I have a bowl that I bought recently. And it's not like we manhandled it or anything like that, but it shattered in less than 6 months of having it. And it made me wonder, is there something going on behind the scenes that we are not seeing? Could it be that what is going on is that manufacturers are beginning to think, oh, I need to get people to buy as much as possible so I can make profit. So let me make things less functional. I'm not calling out anybody. I'm saying that we need to begin to think about these things so that we as consumers can begin to request that producers make things as long-lasting as possible, make things as durable as possible, so that we do not necessarily have to buy and buy and buy again. Right. Now, this will pose a concern. If we have business people in the room or people who know business people, you'd say, how then do they make their profits? Very simple. They begin to think of other business models. They begin to think of other business models. What does that look like? They begin to think of, instead of everybody always buying something, what if I create a system where people can rent items? We do this a lot in Nigeria today. So when you don't necessarily use something constantly, maybe because of your kind of work, but you have to use it occasionally, it is safer to do what? To rent, rather than just purchase it. They can begin to do what? Product as a service. So rather than saying that, oh, you come and take this, let's say a carpet, you just take this carpet, it's a carpet, we're going to give it to you. When you're done with it, dispose of it. They can say, we will give you this service where we will come to your house and we will create a floor tile for you, that anytime that tile gets bad, we will come and replace what is bad in it for you, rather than you having to probably break everything off and then, do the whole process of disposing again. So you begin to create products. Instead of you selling off the product to people, you sell out the service that you will maintain it for as long as possible for them. So they do not necessarily need to keep on buying things as much as possible. You refurbish things. So when things get to the end of their life, right, you say, oh, I'm going to take this from you. There's a way we can deconstruct it and use it to make a brand new material. I know many of us have heard of refurbished phones, right? Or you remanufacture. And then, of course, you recycle. In circular economy, many people tend to think that, oh, it's the very first thing you do. Let's recycle, let's recycle. No, not really. It should be like maybe the last thing in your mind. What should be in your mind is, how can I maintain or prolong this particular item for as long as possible, instead of just taking it, making it, and then wasting it, or taking it, making it, and then shooting it off to be recycled almost immediately. Now that's for the technical material flow. Then we have the biological material flow. And this part looks at it in terms of, these are natural resources. We have trees, we have things of nature. These things easily decomposed. So whenever it is that you're extracting, probably from, you're taking the trees, you're taking wood, you're taking all those things from it, or after a period of time, they can become biogas. And we can use this biogas as a source of power. They can become, feedstock, biochemical feedstock. You can use it for farming. You can use it for agricultural process. So in that sense, you have already closed the loop, because at the end of the day, everything you do in that circle with biological materials, it keeps on coming back to the very beginning. So for circular economy, we often tend to say something about circular economy that it feels like we are trying to imitate nature. So we are trying to learn from what nature has successfully done over the years. Plants, they take in, I think, carbon dioxide, and then they bring out oxygen. We take in oxygen and then bring out carbon dioxide and resources that plants can still in turn use. So it's a circle, and that is how circular economy urges us to think about the things that we do, whether as individuals or producers of products. Now, let's move very quickly to the next thing. So what are the key principles of circular economy? From everything that I have said, I'm sure that you would have taken out some key points, but just in case you missed them, let me begin to list them out for you. First things first, design for longevity and durability. It's a key principle in circular economy. Things should be created and ensure that we have a longer lifespan. Ensure that it's quality materials that are being used. Ensure that it is resistant to wear and tear. Then we have resource efficiency. It's not enough to say that, oh, we're designing for long life. We're designing so that we can use it 10, 15, 20 years. You need to also think about it, that the process of getting these materials to create this thing, am I sure that it is efficient? Right? Am I sure that it is efficient, so that I am not creating a problem in my bid to solve a problem? I'm not creating a problem in my bid to solve another problem. And then we have circular business models. Circular business models talks about the different models I told you about. So rather than thinking, oh, this thing is going to spoil business for me, no. It means you begin to think, how else can I do business? What else can I do? What if I have waste? And what if there is somebody who uses this waste as a raw material to start his own process? Is there a way I can sell off this waste to this person and they utilize it? And that's a business for me. What if I can share my space? I do not have to pay the power bill entirely by myself, or I have some space here and I can't do 2 or 3 businesses at the same time. So you begin to think of other business models that can take place. That's a key principle of circular economy. We have waste reduction. Everything about circular economy is waste reduction. I don't think I need to say too much about this. Waste reduction from the consumption for the production process to the consumption process to even thinking about the packaging. When you're packaging items, you think about waste reduction. When you're selecting the materials, you think about it through substitution. Oh, this one is not working for me. What can I substitute it with that would actually meet the criteria, meaning that I can probably use it again or it will last longer. And then you think also, how can it be disposed? How can the clients that buy from me dispose properly? How can I even teach them how to dispose of items properly? We have regenerate nature. Explained this already. It's a key principle. We're trying to ensure that nature thrives. And then, of course, a key principle is what? Consumer awareness and engagement. Like I said, you are very important to the whole process. I'm very important to the whole process. It's not enough for us to say, oh, the responsibility falls on businesses. No, the responsibility falls on us, because at the end of the day, we are the ones consuming these things that are being produced. So there are habits that we can begin to put in place for ourselves to help ensure that we are supporting the circular economy as well. Now, what are the benefits? Yes, we know the principles now. The benefits are as follows. There are environmental benefits, there are social benefits, there are economical benefits. The environmental benefits, we can't say it enough. It will minimize resource depletion. I'm sure we've heard talks about, oh, what will happen next when oil is gone? Or what will happen next when there's no more lithium? Or what will happen next when we've completely used up this particular resource? So circular economy, because we are constantly saying, instead of taking virgin materials, let's use what already exists in our environment, right? It helps us to minimize resource depletion so that the next generation meets something that they can use, meets functioning ecosystems, doesn't come and meet that nearly everything is extinct. Then we have enhancing energy efficiency. You can't talk about circular economy without talking about energy. That is a key benefit, because by the time you begin to practice circular economy, it allows you to reduce the amount of energy that is consumed. And then, of course, reducing greenhouse gas emission. Because instead of producing everything from scratch, you are reusing, you are repairing, and you are recycling materials, meaning you are using less energy. It also means that the emissions that you create are also less. So technically, the benefits tend to pile up on top each other. It means that as you're doing one thing, that one thing is creating a ripple effect. And if you look at ripples are usually in circles. So maybe that's part of why it's called what a circular economy. So everything tends to build up on top each other. Now, if the environment is fine, definitely we can begin to see that the economy will be fine. Why? Because there will be new business opportunities. We have businesses that exist today that are circular in nature. It means that these businesses have begun to take waste and say, how can I use waste effectively? How can I use waste as a key part of my process? Then we have increased innovation and reduced cost. It's an assignment for everybody that is listening today to say, okay, I'm going to pick up a business, or I'm going to pick up a hobby of mine, because you don't necessarily need to have a business, something you do for fun. I'm going to think about this thing that I do for fun and think about how I can make it a circular loop. Right? That's a task for everybody listening. What is something you enjoy doing? How can you ensure that it is circular in nature? So it might be that you enjoy making beads, right? How can you ensure that the process of your making beads is circular? It might be that you enjoy painting. How can you ensure that everything you do with painting is circular? It can even be that you enjoy writing. Let's think about it. How can it be that what you enjoy doing is circular in nature? Yes, it requires some thoughts, but it's important, because by the time you think about it, you begin to create innovation. I don't know if any of us got to see the video where they showed that you use flip-flops and you're making toys. And it's not even, I don't even think of it as toy. You make art pieces that can be on display in homes and in spaces, right? That's innovation. That's ingenious. We have examples of people who use tire. For example, this month I had the chance to go to an organization called Free Recycle. And what they have done so well is that they've been able to take tires from cars. You can imagine how many cars. I know in your state, you have seen cars, you've seen trucks. Have you ever wondered what happens to the tire at the end of the day? They take these tires, take out the iron, because there's actually steel inside it. They take it out, and then that tire is crushed, is made into soft flakes. And that flake that is made into is then used to make tiles that you can use in your spaces. So you can use these tiles outdoor or indoors. It's also used to make carpets or rugs that you can put in gyms. So if you're a sport enthusiast, you can get something like that for your space. It's also used to make art pieces that can be displayed on the walls in your homes. It's used to make sandals. Why? Because the material is put together from tires and then it's filed, smoothing. There's a whole ingenious process behind it. But it's used to make other things. And the starting point is what? Tires that you would have typically wasted. So that, of course, turns into a lot of resource, a lot of financial resource for the business and for those that are working there as well. We have social benefits, job creation, and of course, improved community well-being. I don't know if anybody is familiar. I'm sure there are people that stay in Lagos here. Have you tried to breathe in Lagos before? Like you are tempted to breathe in fresh air when you were in traffic. And then you are assaulted by, fumes and so many random things that you did not ask for, right? That's because a lot of times, industrialization has taken over to the point where we're not so concerned about how the environment is doing and how people who are in the environment are doing. We now have shorter lifespan. You probably have heard of microplastics, where because there are traces of plastic in water and, fish take this in and then we take in the fishes and then it begins to affect us. Because remember, everything is interconnected. So what happens when we begin to practice circular economy? We begin to reduce how much of these things we experience. Say, for example, not everybody feels like I need to drive my car to work. I can carpool. Or people tend to say, oh, I can do remote work instead of always having to commute long hours to the office. Or we're saying, oh, instead of us having this entire place mixed up with residential and all that, let's have like a space where it's an industrial hub. Majority of the businesses there, they lean on each other or rely on each other for stuff. And then we ensure that human beings that are staying there have the best when it comes to healthcare so that they are fine. Now, when you think through all these things, you're actually looking at circular economy. And when we begin to think that way, of course, we'll have an improved community well-being. All right. Okay. So what I'm going to do very quickly is talk about different spaces or different areas that you can see circular economy in action. There are so many of them. You can see it in food. You can see it in glass recycling. You can see it in packaging, construction, energy, transportation, agriculture, fashion. I've talked about fashion already. You can see it in interior decor. I mentioned those animals made out of flip-flops. They actually design pieces, but then we still have people who still take tires. One company is using tires to make interlocking tiles for the ground. Another company is using tires to make these ottomans and tables and chairs that you can have in your homes, in lounges, in restaurants, right? Beyond that, we have people who are using things, ingenious things we would think are weed. For example, there's something called water hyacinth. It grows on water. It's a weed, a very, very, very notorious weed, right? And we have an organization called Measurements that is taking water hyacinth, teaching people how to weave it. And after that is woven, this is used to make beautiful pieces, beautiful interior pieces that you can have in your homes. From things like chandeliers to things like boxes that you can store stuff in. That is ingenious because they are using waste materials to create other things that can be used by us without necessarily being thrown away, because most of these pieces last almost forever. You can still be handed down. There's transportation. How can transportation be circular, right? There are organizations that are saying, okay, these batteries, this e-waste, these pieces of materials, when you break apart washing machines and your electronics at home, how can we use these things to create something? And someone came up with a bike. Not just one bike, but two bikes. One is actually able to power, one has power enough that it can keep frozen food safe, or even materials that are perishable safe, so that when you are transporting them, it's not an inconvenience, right? One is used for transporting things from your homes to the market or something like that. But everything they do starts from thinking about waste. There's food. A typical example I like to use is coconut. When you think about the coconut, you don't necessarily think about all the things that coconut can do. Or even when you think about the palm tree, You just look at it, and probably the one that is facing you is what you face. But there are people, there's an organization that has said this coconut, we can get coconut oil, we can get coconut shells and do scented candle. We can get the husk around the coconut and use it as a fire starter. We can use the coconut shells itself to make buttons, collaborating with the fashion industry to make buttons, and so on and so forth. In construction, we have people that are taking paper waste and saying that, oh, this paper waste, I'm going to turn it into ceiling tiles. We have people that are saying paper waste, this paper waste, I'm going to do something that they taught you in school, but you felt was not necessary or not useful. I'm going to do paper mache, and I'm going to carefully sandpaper that paper mache and make it into items that are befitting for your homes, and you won't feel embarrassed to have it there. These are things that we have been taught over and over again, but probably feel like, oh, where is the application possible? It just requires you to think deeper and be as innovative as possible. Packaging materials, agriculture. In agriculture, there is so much waste, but you see why agriculture is interesting? Nothing is really wasted. Every single thing that comes out as waste can be used again. Can be used again for a different process, either as a starter or as a middle point or even as a finish point. I'm also very conscious of time. Now, beyond circular economy, we need to talk about waste. Circular economy is saying that we need to reduce waste, right? If possible, design out waste entirely. But then, what about waste management? How do we manage what is already existing? Because remember what I said, you can't be solving a problem and then ignoring the one that is in front of you. Or you cannot be solving a problem and then what you are solving is causing a problem on its own to what is existing. We already have enough problems as it is. So we need to think about it looking at the two angles. So we think circular economy, and at the same time, we think what sustainable waste management. Now, what is sustainable waste management? It simply means how can we systematically be responsible in our approach to handling, treating, and disposing of waste material. There is always going to be waste. If you are somebody that works in the medical space, there is going to be medical waste. If you are a homekeeper, you have a house, there's going to be waste because you buy things, you will use things. So at the end of the day, there are items that are going to be disposed of. If you're a teacher, you will have things that you, afterwards, probably at the end of class or at the end of an arts and craft project, there's going to be waste. Even the books that children use at the end of the day, at a certain point, if there is no plan as to how to keep those things or make it last longer, or probably hand it down to a next class that can utilize it, it might end up as waste. So what is sustainable waste management? It talks about how we can systematically and responsibly handle things that we would typically call waste, things that are probably at the end of their life, so that as much as possible, we can ensure that human health is kept safe and resources are recovered. Because remember I said that what waste is also a resource. So we have waste hierarchy. When you think about waste, I know when I was sharing with you all that in the technological flow, there's usually a need for you to think about recycling as probably one of the last things, but then think about a lot of other things. How can we share it? How can we repair? How can we refurbish? It's the same thing with waste hierarchy. In waste hierarchy, you need to prioritize waste. You need to think about what is the first way to handle this? What's the second way? What's the third best way? And so on and so forth. So we have reduce. This one, we love it more than anything else because it means that if possible, let's prevent it from happening at all. One example I like to use here is everybody at some point has gone to a party or an event, and then they're handing out souvenirs. I like to use wedding as a very typical example. You are going to a wedding, and sometimes you don't even carry any gifts for the bride and groom. I know you all. And then they're handing out souvenirs, and you have packer in your house. You have hand fan. You have plastic spoon. You have all those things at home. But no, you are one of the first people to stretch your hand to say, Efumi, no, that's Yoruba, give me my own. And then you probably keep it in your house, and I don't know what you want to use it for. I have seen people do that. If you don't do that, kudos to you. But I have seen people do that. I have experienced that. Reduce tells you to what? Prevent it. If you do not need it, don't get it. If you don't need it, don't take it into your house. Plenty of us that have t-shirts that we went here, went there, they gave t-shirts to us, and we technically don't need it. Sometimes it might be impolite to say, oh no, right? So you might want to take it and say, how can I hand it over to somebody who needs it more? This is on the consumer end. Beyond that, it also talks about packaging. You went to buy something, they are giving you 53 nylons to package that particular material. You can decide that, oh, whenever I'm going to buy something, I think a lot of us do this already, I'm going to go with my own plastic bag, or better still, I'm going to go with my own eco-friendly purchase bag, because there are bags that are eco-friendly right now that are being made. I know we've seen the massive rise of tote bag, yes, as a fashion statement, but also as a responsible way of keeping things or packaging things or moving around with things. I'm going to go out with those things so that there is less packaging having to be done before I get the product I need. Because when I get home, most of these things I will still have to dispose of yet again. So reduce things of prevention. Then we have reuse. So maybe you cannot do away with reducing, like there's nothing you can do. It just happened. We have containers, especially containers. We have containers in this set. How can we reuse it? Now, beyond containers, how can we reuse probably our pouch, phone pouch? I don't know who it is I saw with an ingenious idea to take old phone pouches and then to begin to redesign them to such that you will love them. We also know somebody, so there's a company called ASAP. They take jeans that you would probably have thrown away, jeans materials and all, jeans trousers, jean jackets and all that. And then they cut up these jeans into different pieces, but make a whole new item, a whole new fashion item from those kind of materials. So you have a whole new jacket from different cuts of jeans that there is almost no way for you to know that this particular material like was this thing. So, and we have people that constantly love those things because they are functional. At some point you need a jacket, at some point you need an office bag, but you won't believe that these things are made from materials that we probably would have thrown away. So that's another aspect of reusing it. Some people would want to say maybe recycling it. That's also fine. Under reuse, we have refurbishing, we have repair, we have cleaning them, we have ensuring that we can use it rather than demanding for a new product. And this helps us to conserve resources. Then we have recycling. So what if we can't reuse it anymore? What if that is it? That is it for it. There are ways for us to recycle these things. We even have upcycling as well. Instead of us to just throw them away, we turn them into new items. And you can do recycling for different materials, not just plastics. So I mentioned a company that uses paper to make ceiling board or ceiling tiles. We have companies that use glass, broken pieces of glass that you will typically throw away. Use that glass to make artistic pieces that you can put in your house and functional pieces as well. New glass bowls, new jugs, new Tupperwares. So metals also can be recycled. And then we have recovery. So when recycling is not possible, we need to think of how can we use them for energy generation. And one of the things I really would like to point out is when it comes to recovery, you know, there is something about a lot of the waste or a lot of items ending up at landfills, but then it doesn't have to end up at landfill. There's a way to actually still use that waste material to produce fuel. So to produce fuel doesn't necessarily mean petrol. Fuel means like a power source. It can be used to create like a power source. It could be heat, it could be electricity, simply because we are combusting these waste materials. So it doesn't necessarily have to end at a landfill. More can be done. And of course, we can't do it alone. I think at different points in time, I've made mention or I've hinted on collaboration. Why is that? Because collaboration is very essential for us to be able to do anything we want to do in circular economy space. Why? Because of the linkages. So you might not be able to handle it alone. However, you can collaborate with somebody else who is doing something or who has nailed down a process that you need to effectively work. And this is what people and businesses are beginning to do in circular economy space. Let's very quickly talk about some of the waste reduction or waste minimization strategies that we can do. We can buy in bulk, we can reuse, and we can avoid single-use products. If you are not demanding for single-use products, producers will not produce single-use products. If you are asking the question to say, is this thing reusable? Like, let us know, how is this sustainable? What is the process that led to this? If you are asking those questions, believe you me, producers will begin to take more responsibility for the things that they produce. And also, we can ask the question, why? Do I really need this? Why is this particular thing like this? It would also help us to minimize or reduce how much waste that we generate. What are the types of waste? I mentioned that there can be different waste that can be recycled. I mentioned paper, I mentioned glass, I don't think I mentioned metal, but metal in itself also can be recycled. Aluminium also can be recycled. But there are different types of waste and there are different strategies to manage this waste. We have MSW, solid waste. This is waste in your household. And the best way to actually manage waste from your house is separating at the source. I know some of us have just one dustbin in our house. In that dustbin, when you wash dishes, the food waste from the plates is in that dustbin. You tear up a package, is in that same dustbin. Every single thing you do, plastic bottles is in that dustbin. That makes life sort of difficult for anybody who is eventually going to recycle those things to do that. So what is better for you to do? Separate at source. You might not have the capacity to buy 4 different dustbins. I understand. Sometimes it doesn't even make sense. So what can we do instead? We can do makeshift bags. So instead of bagging everything together, you can have different bags and put it at different points so it's convenient for you. Typically for food waste, where would you put that? You want to put it what? Underneath your wash area or beside your wash area, so that by the time you are taking out food waste, you can put it inside that. Sorry. You don't even necessarily need to put it in a bag. You can put food waste in a container, and then that can actually begin a process for decomposition or composting, right? That is one end for food waste. But then essentially, you want to separate things at the source. There are countries where it is essential for everybody at home. You get your scissors and you begin to separate items before you can dump them. We've not gotten to that point here, but we can begin to do that simple steps in our homes. Biodegradable waste. Most of these things are linked. Biodegradable waste are waste that are organic in nature. They decompose naturally. So you want to group them together. You want to ensure that you do composting. I talked about this a little while ago. Okay, you are composting. What can you use it for? In many of our homes, we have flower beds. You might want to say, oh, how can I research how to use food waste to turn this into a manure that I can use to probably grow flowers? Or I might want to grow pumpkin, ugu in my backyard. There are ways for you to actually grow healthy crops in your homes without having too much soil around you. So you might want to think about it to say, how can I begin to research these things so that I don't have waste at the end of the day? And it doesn't have to be dirty. Your environment can still be neat if you know how to do things the right way. Non-biodegradable waste, plastics, some of these things, they don't decompose. So there's a way to actually put it together. Remember, separate from source. So if you're able to do that, we can actually still do energy recovery through waste to energy incineration. Most of these materials, because they don't decompose, we can eventually turn them, they don't end up in the landfill, we can turn them into raw materials to get in power, electricity. There are waste plants. I know that a waste plant, there's currently talks to have a waste plant created in Lagos State. There have been conversations about which landfill is the best one to use. Why? Because there's a lot of logistics, there's a lot of things that go around into producing a solution, Remember, I said if you are creating a solution, you need to think about it so you are not creating a problem. So you need to think about who is already there, who is already utilizing these products, who is already gaining from this. How can I make sure that that person is not cut out? Or otherwise, people will resist what they feel is coming against them or what they do not understand. Plastic waste, we can't talk about this enough. If it's possible, minimize using single-use plastics. Recycle. There are recycling bins around you. Recycle. Don't just throw it on the floor. Don't just hide it somewhere that you probably not see for a long time. As much as possible, drop it somewhere that it can be recycled. Textile waste. I talked about this. You can actually make textile waste into new products. If you know that clothes that you no longer want to use, or you know that you have clothes that you can no longer use, you might want to donate them. You might want to sell them out. You might want to work with thrifters to see how these products can be exchanged. There's a company, Closet Sales, that handles things like this. They do a lot of handling of textile waste. There are several companies, in fact, that handle this as well. Okay, we have e-waste. E-waste needs proper, so for e-waste, this is our phones, our gadgets, blenders, and all. This best strategy for e-waste is actually proper collection and recycling. Why? Because you cannot just separate it yourself. You might break something you're not supposed to break. You might expose yourself to something that is dangerous for you. So there are actually pickup sites that you can drop off electronic wastes that you have. I know many of us will be familiar with, they call it Pakara Depot, where I'm from. But these are people, scavengers, people, not necessarily even scavengers, people that come to your houses and they're always shaking this metal thing, indicating that they are willing to collect metals that you have. A lot of them can also collect e-waste. But then you might want to check in your environment who is the best collector, because there are collection sites being set up almost every month in places around you. You just need to find the best one where you can drop it. Construction waste. How do you manage construction waste? Is either you prepare it to be reused or you ensure that they are disposed in the right places. Construction waste is waste that is generated during construction activities. When they are demolishing houses or buildings, what is the waste used for? Sometimes I've seen it being used as a component for filling for the new buildings. But what if it's not something that can be filled? What if it's wood? What if it's metal? Each of these items have their own channels that they go through. So you need to ensure that it goes to the right place. If this is something that you are used to encountering in your place of work or whatever you do. We have agricultural waste. I think of this also as organic waste. Composting is one of the best things. Medical waste, there's segregation, there's proper packaging, there's safe disposal according to regulation. The medical sector has its own laid down rule as to how you will dispose things like syringes, cotton cloth or cotton wools, or basically things that if it gets out into the public, it can cause like an infection, or it can cause a very, very dangerous or harmful effect on the environment, not necessarily the environment, on the humans that encounter it. So most times medical waste is incinerated, right? So, but then there is a whole process that I know that is being taught to medical practitioners so that they are aware of this as well. What other types of waste can you think of? I didn't mention all of them. I know some people will be thinking, I mentioned painting. What happens to paint? Paint that is wasted, or paint that you've kept in the corner of your house that you will one day use to paint, but then you open it and it's as caked. What can you use that for? I know there is a challenge that is going on as to finding how can we use this waste again. Sometimes it might not necessarily be you that needs to think about it on your own. You might want to read what are people doing about it, and that might spark a bit of ingenuity in you to say, okay, this is what I think can be done. Sometimes there are people who are trained because this is something they constantly use, or this is something that they know the composition of. They can better say how it can be segmented or how it can be used effectively. So you might want to give thoughts to this as well. I've shared this slide with the organizers. So if you want to access this slide, I'm sure they'll share with you as well. So there are videos embedded in the slides. The videos would help explain what I'm saying, and at the same time, give a bit of nudging in case you want to look deeper than what I've shared with you today. Now, this is where I'm going to be rounding up, integrating circular economy and sustainable waste management. I mentioned to you that both of them actually tend to lean on each other. Why? You can't talk about circular economy without talking about sustainable waste management. You can't really talk about sustainable waste management without talking about circular economy, because you're all about closing the loop. And where both of them kind of share similarities, or how they can be integrated, is to look at the fact that they have shared objectives. The objective of both of them is to ensure that we are creating a sustainable and resilient economy. So we want an economy that everything goes well. It's not that one part of it is shaking and then the other part is fine. Both of them see waste as a resource. Yes, even when you're doing your sustainable waste management, it's important to think about it. You can either reuse it again, that's a resource. You can use it as an energy source. That's a resource on its own. So it has the potential to be used again. It's quite useful. And then design for circularity. Even when you are designing for circularity, one of the emphasis you keep making is, how can I minimize waste? So how can I ensure that my consumers are consuming responsibly? If things are durable and long-lasting, there's a tendency for consumers to also, think of it that way, that I don't need to consume so much. And I'm sure a lot of people would have observed that there is a high tendency for people to consume. There is a high tendency for people to be encouraged towards consumerism. This is why in circular economy, it's important to begin to teach, create an awareness that you do not need to consume so much. You can live a very happy lifestyle with little things, and it doesn't mean that you are poor. It means that you are more conscious of how your actions affect the environment. Right. And this is where I round up. I said the other one. So this whole slide talks about collaboration. We need you, we need businesses, we need the government, we need communities to work together to achieve this. It doesn't stop at what you can do. It continues from there. Remember, it's a circle, it ripples. One action eventually spills over to the next level, to the next level, to the next level, until we have a completely circular economy. So policies need to be put in place. There needs to be enforcement, because we know a lot of people don't like to hear what, sadly, or sad to say. We know it needs to be enforced. We know there needs to be infrastructure. You have the excuse of there is no recycling center nearest to me. So there's a tendency for you to do what you want. We need to have education. I don't even know what circular economy is. That's a problem. So there are so many things that needs to happen, and this can only happen through stakeholder collaboration. With that, I'm going to hand over to our host for today. I think this is where I round up. I do hope you've taken away something. If nothing at all, do take away the fact that circular economy is quite important because of one thing. It is possible to eliminate waste through circular economy. That's the whole premise of circular economy. It is very possible to eliminate waste. Thank you very much.
Wow. This is so amazing. Thank you so much. In fact, it's as if we should just look for a way to tap into infinity and extract a little time from infinity, and just let us use a little time from infinity so that this lecture will not end. It's so amazing. And of course, even our participants from YouTube, ever since we started this section, they have been dropping their comments, their reaction has been so wonderful, very informative. They have been contributing to everything you are saying, and of course, you have really delivered a lot this evening. Everybody has gained a lot, and we really appreciate that. And anytime you show up, it's just like a brand new knowledge is about to be, and that's how it always be. Thank you so much. So yeah, right now we'll just take a few questions. I cited some questions from participants. Likewise, our participants, do well to drop your question in the chat box. I will pick it up from here and we'll get to answer. So I have this one from Munkoro Stanley. He said, are there some particular wastes that can't be recycled or reduced, reused, and recovered? If yes, what becomes the fate of such waste, please?
Okay, so are there particular wastes? So at this point, I don't think there are wastes that cannot be recycled, reused. I think it depends on the kind of waste. So for example, I'm trying to think of an example of something that probably cannot be used. Okay, I think of it this way, that everything actually has a foundation. So everything has something that it was created from. So for example, this is why it's hard. I would say a wooden table now. A wooden table was not necessarily a wooden table at the beginning. It was a tree, right? So because it was a tree, at some point, because it's degradable, it can go back to being that again. How? It will become nutrients for another tree. If we want to talk about the only areas I would say, okay, that might be difficult is technical areas. That's the technical materials. So materials like copper that you use. So there are some parts of your phone or your devices or gadgets in your house that have a copper, maybe a copper coil or something like that. Those items, they don't biodegrade. However, they can be reused over and over again. Copper is actually mined. There is word that copper is going to be, if we're not careful, it's going to go out by 2040. In that situation, what happens? Does it mean that there is no copper that exists again? Not really. There is copper that has existed before that people have probably dumped somewhere and forgotten about. So what will happen in a situation where that is extinct? We now have to go back and think about how can we recycle the copper that has been used already and use it to create other items. So I think if you think about it this way, there is really nothing that you cannot use again. So long as you can create it, there is always a way to reuse it again. It just probably needs a bit of probing. That's what I would say. Even air, there is a way to generate air again. Yeah.
Of course. Oxygen.
Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you so much for that. I think I started another question. The
Okay.
person is asking about, we have some product that gets expired.
Yeah.
Before you get to make use of it, you
Mhm.
have expired date on it, and that's all. So, what's the fate of those products? What do you get to do with it?
I don't know. What do you do with products that expire? So I think it depends on where it expires. If it expires in your house, most of the time you throw it out. If it expires and most times what expires is food or perishable items, right? And one
Yeah.
of the things we've learned today is that it can be decomposable. So even if it's expired, it's not really, really bad. You can actually put it in, say, maybe containers, depending on if you have the tool. So for example, expired biscuit now, if you break it up, it's food waste. It will still decompose and you can still use it for planting. Expired juice, because it's water, really, it will sink into the soil eventually if you throw it out that way. So food items that expire can be used as compost material. Now, creams and soaps and all those things that expire, that one might be a bit tricky. What I know exists for that is some companies have begun to recall products. So they began to recall products. So at the end of the life of particular products, they now have a policy that you can return this to us. We will figure it out how to use these materials again because it's part of our responsibility. There's something called producer responsibility. So they have a responsibility to ensure that items that are no longer in use, something actually happens to it from their end. So that's how I would answer that.
Yes, thank you so much. I will just try to take two more questions before I release you. So this is another question from Stanley. The question is, what is the strength and durability of a recycled material with respect to its chartering possibilities?
Chartering possibilities in what sense? I don't think I got the last part of the question. Okay.
Exactly. Possibly is talking about ability to disseminate, to break it down again.
Okay. So okay, maybe take the question again. What is the
strength and durability of a recycled material with respect to its shattering possibility? That is, maybe it might not be that durable. such that because it is recycled, it might easily cause damage.
Great, yes.
So he's trying to compare the strength of recycled material and those that are actually made from from their original.
Yes. Okay. Okay, so I think I get it now. So what is the, I think that question, again, I like you to think of it relative to the item in question. Relative to the item in question. So for example, for plastics, I know that there are recycled plastics that are being used right now, right? There's recycled plastic bottles that are being used, not just recyclable plastic, like they have been recycled already and they are being used right now. And most of the time, you can't even tell the difference from the one that is from virgin plastics. So sometimes their composition is not that different. It's just the sentiment towards it by people. So some people do not like things that you are recycling. Recycling doesn't mean reusing. So for example, we have plastics bottles that we've used, we bought it was a drink that was inside, and now it's chin-chin that is inside. You didn't recycle it, you simply reused it for another thing. After a while, that bottle will eventually wear out or become softer or something like that. If at that point it is recycled, there's a process where I think some form of veggie material is still added to it to ensure that it's still durable. A certain percentage is added to it so that it's still durable. That's one side. Then number two is there are standards. So because innovation keeps coming out, there is a certain standard that materials must meet before they are released to consumers outside. So I don't think you need to worry so much about the durability, because if it meets the standard, then it will be allowed to go out into the market. So that's how best I can answer that. That yes, they're actually quite durable. Yes, there are standards by Standard Organization of Nigeria and some other standardization authorities that these materials need to go to. For example, the tires I talked about, that these tires are used to make floor tiles. There are actually floor tiles that are being made outside the country. The machineries that are being used to make these materials, they got it from outside the country. Then we had to learn how to adapt it to our own environment. Now, because our own environment is uniquely different from that environment, there had to be a bit of testing and all that. Because that's an innovation, it has to be approved by the Standard Organization of Nigeria. So it has to pass probably fire test, water test, some form of test to ensure that, yes, this is actually fit to be consumed by human beings. So there are tests. Even if you decide to make a product, there are still some tests you need to undergo before it's allowed to the public. So I think that should probably answer that question of the chartering. There are still tests it needs to undergo for it to be acceptable for you to consume.
Thank you so much, Ma.
Okay.
All right, so I will just read two more questions. I will read the two once and for all. Now, the first one is, with the rate at which individual, this one is from Jumia Nene. So, with the rate at which individuals are going off the grid, installing solar panel, which is not their fault, what strategy could be utilized to handle the waste in the future? That's the waste of these solar panels. So what strategy could be used?
That's a brilliant question.
Exactly, utilized to handle the waste. Now, that's the first question. The second question is, our participants are majorly teachers from both secondary school and primary schools. And I started the question also that this person is asking that being in school environments, how can they actually handle their waste, knowing fully well that they generate a lot of waste, paper waste, polythene waste, plastic waste. So how can they actually handle this waste in their schools?
Okay, thank you so much for that. So let's try and answer the first question. Everybody is installing solar panels. How can we handle the waste in future? I think that's quite a thoughtful question. First things first, we know that solar is an alternative energy source, renewable energy source, in fact. So yes, it is very good. It's much more preferable to some other power sources that are not good. That's number one. The fact that you are thinking about what happens to the panels at the end of the day is very interesting. So this is the strategy I will propose. I don't know if it exists currently. I'm not in the solar panel market, I would say that at a certain point at the end of the life of so I know that companies do give warranties, meaning, oh, if this goes bad within 1 year, I will come and reclaim it, or I will fix it for you at maybe less cost or at no cost at all. That's one. Beyond the warranty strategy, there should be another one that says that we've tested our products and we've seen that for 10 years, it can last long. And then by 10 years, that's the only point we can take these panels and use it to reconstruct another panel that will be durable or that can be used by somebody else. So at that 10-year mark, allow us to come into your homes again, we that have installed it for you, and to take it down and probably give you a new set at less than that price or at a reduced cost, right? Then we will recycle this and use to create new functional ones that can be issued out to somebody else. That way, you keep the materials at high value for a long period of time. That's one of the strategy. So I think the question is, the person who is buying the solar panel needs to be asking those questions. Is this thing forever and ever? I don't think people ask that question. Is the solar panel forever and ever? How long? Like, what is the lifespan of this panel? And then when this thing is finished, do you have a recall policy? So do you have this policy where I can come give it back to you? Because like you pointed out, the solar panel and even the batteries, they are e-waste. And remember I said that e-waste needs some careful management to handle it. So it means that at the end, I don't think it's a problem. We can use it because it's e-waste. But then the handling shouldn't be done by just us. It should be by somebody who is trained in how to handle it effectively. So those are the strategies, and that's like the other guideline for handling the waste at that point in time. You can actually use e-waste to either create new panels. We have a company called Quadloop. They use e-waste to create solar panels, rechargeable bulbs, like light bulbs, panels you can use to charge your laptops, and it's from e-waste. So that's their own strategy. So they're using it to make more products. So it can be used. The thing is just there needs to be a system, like you've noticed, where it can be recalled, or the producers can recall it and get it back, and consumers are not just left stranded. Then for the question on the schools handling their waste, for that one, I think because, a school is actually a place of business. It's in the business of education, right? So most of the time, schools can work with the waste management authorities to actually get their waste. And I think some of them do this already. Now, if you're talking about waste in your classroom, I think what you can do is you can begin to teach your pupils how to separate their waste at source. And then eventually, take it up with the school management to say, this is something that I've learned. Is it possible for us to have separation bins in the school? Because if you separate from your classroom, you can eventually go to the central bin where it is going to be collected and separate there as well. So it's more like you're just transferring it into the bin. And then we have, in Lagos State, we have Loma. They go around, they collect this waste. We also have in different states, I know in Ogun State we have as well, we have waste authorities that handle this waste. They can also carry this waste out. Yes, they carry this waste out separated as well. Another thing is you might want to think about the kind of waste you're generating. So if it's paper waste, you might want to do fun art projects. So you might want to do fun art projects. If it's plastic waste, you might want to think, how can these children use this as art and craft? So there's a way to use water hyacinths to wrap around plastic bottles and use them as flower vases. So that's an interesting way to get children to play hands-on, to see how waste is being transformed into something tangible, beyond just maybe separating it in the dustbin. You might tell them, oh, we're going to make a fun design now. Let me see how you can use these colorful plastic pieces or containers to make a picture. And then you have gum, glue, and all these things. And it can be displayed on the school because those art pieces will last very long. And it can tell a story of how they learned how to use waste. So I think for children, it's usually fun to make it, it's usually interesting to make it a fun activity for them. But for the waste that that you have to dispose of, ensure that you have separation bins and ensure that your school has an agreement with the waste management authority of the state to carry those waste out. Thank you.
Wow, just like the last comment I'm reading from YouTube, now, the person said, wow, amazing, and the person is clapping. Yes, this is so amazing. People from across Africa are really saying thank you. I can see Mariam from Namibia. I can see people from Cameroon. They are really appreciating you for this wonderful presentation. It's been a very, very impactful one, and we are delighted to have you this evening. Thank you so much. On behalf of Africa and the entire participants, we are saying a very big thank you to you for this evening.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much. Bye. We hope to see you some other time. Yeah, do have a lovely evening. Okay, that is it today on Teach4SDGs Workshop Series 2. I believe everybody, you have learned a lot this evening, and we are glad to receive your feedback right from the comments, from the chat box. Thank you for staying up to this moment. We sincerely appreciate your presence and your commitment to learning. Yes, so briefly, the tracking and evaluation form has been dropped. Kindly use that link to fill the form. But before you fill the form, let's have this information that is very important. So you are to make a post concerning what you have learned here this evening on your social media platform, either on LinkedIn or on Facebook. Do it to write a post about what you have learned this evening. So copy the link of that post and attach it to the tracking and evaluation form. That is the task for today, and we have just 12 hours to do that. I believe 12 hours is a lot of how we can actually do these tasks within 10 to 15 minutes. But we are given the grace of 12 hours. Let's engage to do that. The link is already in the chat. So let's get the link there and do the needful. On behalf of AIIDEV Africa, the entire team, the entire leadership of this organization, we want to say a very big thank you for having us this evening and for staying to this moment to enjoy this workshop series. We shall be meeting again next week, same time, same venue. Till then, keep sorting your waste and keep practicing sustainable waste management and circular economy. From here, we say, enjoy the rest of your weekend and bye for now. Thank you.